Happy Monday, everyone. I am full of energy because I've got one of the best guest speakers that I would have had this year. And I've had a lot of great speakers because I've been really lucky. A lot of great women have raised their hand because they know my mission is to help women just make progress. And these are all committed women to this cause. So today in the episode, I have Niha Wunnava, who is a leadership and an executive coach for women of color and our allies who want to create balanced, explosive success through bold strategic action and risk taking. She teaches women modern inclusive leadership skills so her clients outshine, lead with ease, taking their place as important, essential decision makers. Let all of that sink in, especially if you are a woman of color who are also a leader and you know how freaking hard you've worked to get to where you are. Welcome to the show, Niha. I'm so, genuinely so excited to have you here.
It is so mutual, Olga. I know that we've talked many times before, and every single time I feel a little brighter and a little lighter, and I'm certainly energized by what you're doing and how you're doing it. So it's exciting to be here. I'm honored and thrilled and so excited for where I know this conversation with us coming together for your community and for all the listeners that listen after us.
Super exciting. So before we started recording, I was like, you guys, I never script these episodes. I let them be as natural as possible because it's better that way in my own mind, just get people in their raw element to speak their genius. And I just asked Niha, what are we talking about? And she said risk. And that's exactly where we're going to take you, ladies. We're going to be talking about taking risk. Why is it difficult for us to do it? How we as high achieving women are already perhaps more prone to wanting to take risks than the average humans out there. However, we also have a lot of overthinking involved and doubt. And I think Niha is going to explain to us why that is and how to invest maybe in being risk takers. I don't know.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. You hit all the nails on the head. And I think it's so critical for us first to normalize why we don't take risks and not make it something that is like a set point. I think I even was at a talk yesterday, and I heard somebody say, we either are or are not risk averse or risk takers. And I want to challenge that because I don't know. I don't believe that it's a set point that can't change, that it is just our identity. I think it's something we have to purposefully desire to cultivate. And I have a business case, which we'll get to right after the first question you asked me, for why we want to do it. So the first thing we want to think about is that as humans, and I know that you know this, we are designed to be safe, to take care of the wellness of ourselves and to, essentially make sure that we did not die. Mm-hmm. So if we are alive today, that means that the people before us were huge worriers. They were anxiety ridden. They had to take on and stay away from all of these dangers that would have killed them, and therefore we would not be alive. So by definition, in our DNA, from our history, we come from people before us that were risk averse. But the truth of the matter is that it's 2023 and we no longer need to prescribe to such a cautious way of living, particularly when we have already achieved so much. We have the basics. Many of us listening either have the basics or we want to make sure that we have the basics. But high achieving women have what they need. But what they have also been taught is in order to achieve well, we had to sacrifice a lot. We had to be really, really careful. And that served us up until now. That served us in our education as a student, as a woman, because we're the nurturers, we're the caretakers, we're the one that established the household, make sure that it typically runs. Those things are changing now. Those boundaries are expanding, thankfully, but typically a lot of women are reporting all of it still falls on them. Mm-hmm. So when you're balancing so much, there's only so much energy you could put mentally into pushing the boundaries of risk-taking, thinking about yourself differently, and thinking about things that upset the apple cart. But there's nothing wrong with us when we don't take on risk. But the challenge today for you, for me, and for all of our listeners is that we decide today that we are committed to being high achieving risk takers, because then in our businesses and our lives and in our industry, we really push the boundaries of the imagination of what's possible with our intellect and our inspiration.
Okay. So I just closed off a coaching session before you with a high achieving executive, and she said, I've got a problem. She created the position that she's sitting in. It didn't exist, right? High achieving. She's like, there is a gap. There is a position. She got it. And her director said to her, okay, so now what's the goal? And she's like, well, I don't know. Where could I go from here? And he was like, no, you're in it. What are you going to do with it, with the position? And she's like, oh. So she says, I have a problem because when I achieve, the moment I get what I was looking for, I'm bored. And I'm like, what's next? So we were talking about effort, boredom, and using that intellect to perhaps take risks within the position. So you said like there's nothing wrong with you. Many women do walk thinking, even though they've achieved great things, that there must be something wrong with them. They're never quite fully satisfied with where they are. I'm sure you see this in your with your clients as well. How will that have to do with risk taking or not risk taking?
Absolutely.
Tell me.
That's such a great connection that you have made. So insightful. It doesn't surprise me at all coming from you. But the thing here is that, she's attaching that something greater or bigger is possible outside of her and in the title, in the position, like a higher level of responsibility or authority outside of her, above her, will then allow her to do something that she's finding exciting. And I think that is tied to risk. And I speak about that exactly. If you are doing something that you think is boring, if your employees and your organization seems a little lackluster and disengaged, and you're thinking about what's next, it's something else, it's because you are not pushing the bold boundaries of what's available to you right now. You're thinking in a way that probably looks to the past for what's already been done, and you are more thinking about the status quo, maintenance, not strategically thinking 5 or 10 or even 25 years. One great exercise is to really think 25 years from now. How do you want the industry to look? How do you want your impact to have made a mark on the industry? What becomes really explosive and possible that people are too scared to say right now? A lot of things will come up. You might feel nauseated at how big or scary it can be. You're on the right path. You might feel super scared. Ask yourself, who the heck am I? You're on the right path.
All of that just popped into my head as you were describing what to do. You're reading my mind now.
Exactly. Because those are our limiting blockers that keep us doing what we know, the formula for what has been done in the past or what we have created today. Because what we created today, we based it on previous levels of thinking. Even maybe 3 years ago, we had to have this idea for today. But now we have to push the boundaries of our thinking and our emotions to what I like to call hers. We want to feel that humiliation of failure. We are going to feel embarrassment. We are expected to feel rejection when somebody says, that sounds crazy. No, thanks. Go find your crazy person somewhere else. Go find your crazy resources somewhere else. Rejection, abandonment in that. And then what follows is shame. As women, as people of color, all of those emotions feel extremely dangerous. Risk in and of itself, the definition of risk, the reason why it carries so much stigma is because the definition of risk includes the fact that it is a danger to us. So we avoid it. But what we know for sure is that there are other people in our industries, other people, other male counterparts who have figured the emotional quotient inside of them and do it anyway. They're doing it. They're taking the risk, saying the bold thing, saying it with spice, saying it with flavor, and going for it. That's how you see a re-engineered industry, like an electric car, like people buying things from their phone that gets delivered to their doorstep, like drones dropping packages on our houses. People did the unthinkable. And now we as women, as CEOs and modern thinkers, we need to do the same and embrace risk by pushing our risk identity. When you think differently, you do differently. You're willing to take things that you've never done before. You're willing to take them on and believe that you can make it a success.
Did you tell me the business study that you wanted to tell me? You said.
So the case study, the business case for taking on risk is increased profits and revenues. And here's why. You will be a risk taker who goes ahead and enters the new market, a market that didn't exist before. You're willing to impact it. You're willing to redefine it. And you're willing to feel a little bit crazy on your way there. You are willing now to create new product streams, new revenue streams, new service lines that didn't exist before. You're not looking at the tried and true. You're not just looking at what's been done before. You're looking at a gap and you're using your imagination to fill it, finding a team, selling them on your vision and expanding the possibility around it and bringing what's not real into reality through literally starting to write it down in a notebook. That's how you make it happen. And then finally, you are able to take on things you have never done before and put an action plan that includes new beliefs and failure. We are so busy avoiding failure. We are so busy avoiding not losing that we are not playing to win and to succeed. We don't double down on our genius and we lose out on profit and power and revenues that would flow to us when we're in greater belief.
I love this and the timing of this. I'm making some behind the scenes changes to my own business. And one of the things that I've noticed is that in order to make this change happen, it's a risk, definitely a risk I'm taking. I've had to up level. You will understand that language. I could explain more to the audience. I had to up level my identity of who I am. Without that step, I'm not able to make the change. And so can you talk a little bit more about this change? I'm calling it up leveling. I think you said change of identity as a risk taker or as a woman in leadership, making bold decisions, because we love when people make bold decisions. Like I admire them for far. I'm like, good for you. You said that out loud. I've always been the person who says out loud what everybody in the room is thinking. But I've been reprimanded for it, right? Like, oh my God, you don't say those things out loud. I'm like, but somebody had to feel a little bit of release that somebody said it. I love being that person. I said it. Somebody had to say it, but I've been reprimanded. So I really had to as I moved from being in school, I was reprimanded for it, in university as well. And when working for other people also, they're like, just keep it in your head. You don't have to say it. And it just, my eyes speak on my behalf. When I do keep it inside, I'm like, well, something is going to say it. Whether it be my body language, my eyes, my attitude. So I'm now embracing being that bold person, because we all love having somebody in the group who's please will just, send the shark over to whoever. How do you help? Especially if we've tamed out that part of our personality, maybe. And for those who maybe never had it, that's just been my natural way of being.
Yeah.
How do you start making bold decisions, we're understanding why risk might be difficult for us? Like you brought us back all the way when we were living in caves and, our DNA was intended and progressed to keep us safe and protected, to making those bold decisions when the outcomes can be a loss of income for a little bit, or it can be rejection from people who you might really need as partners in business, or your managers, if we have executives listening. How do you suggest these women begin to take those risks and be a bit more bold without burning bridges, so to speak?
Well, here's the thing, Olga. We might burn some bridges. And that's the thing. We're told so often, don't shake things up, particularly as women and people of color. You're told, be sweet, be agreeable. Don't say things that are offensive or challenging. Hey, listen, we'd be really backwards in time. And we are seeing that there is a challenge and we may be going that way. We'd be really backwards in time if people didn't say things that were in their head. And and if they didn't proceed, even when they were reprimanded. So reprimanded is another way of saying I was rejected.
Okay.
I was told that was wrong. And my question is, who says and who cares?
I love it.
Because number one, you heard it and you also decided. And that's a huge part of this being decided. You decided, hey, something didn't add up to you that led you to a path for you to be in charge of Olga's way. How she's going to do it and then blaze a light and a path for other women to find the courage to do it too.
Yep.
So how we do this is we look, and some of the exercises I do with my clients is we really understand what in the past caused you to shut down, causes you to be fearful. And it is never to reject it as much as it is to understand it and embrace. Maybe that happened when we were 12, 16, in our early 20s, early on in our career. Who do we want to be now and why? And taking it a step farther, what tools and resources do I have now and for the rest of my life that I invest in and grow and nurture so that no one gets to reprimand me and tell me no, and then I shut down? You didn't shut down.
You're speaking my language.
You went on. And so we need that. We need people pushing us and investing in us. And we also need to find our like-minded champions and bring them on our team. And that's why it's so critical that we develop a culture of success that embraces risk-taking. So a part of our mission, our vision, and our strategy. So I have a background in strategic operations and strategy and tying those things together for success. But we have to be willing to create businesses and brains that are associated with trying new things, risk-taking, and being okay to fail. So there has to be psychological safety within ourselves and within our team to be able to make mistakes. And somebody can come to you and say, Olga, oh my gosh, I really screwed up. Listen to this. Listen, I made this pitch. It didn't go this way. I screwed it up. And then you're going to be, as a leader, all right, how are we going to make it happen? How are we going to course correct? Why is it always better to shed light on the mistake, on the rejection, on the problem, instead of hiding it in solitude, in shame, because that causes shutdown?
Oof, you're bringing up subject of leadership and how do we, encourage other women for them to be safe to make mistakes. We know that the high achieving woman is allergic to failure. She thinks, making mistakes is a big personal failure, which you and I know that's fixed mindset. So we want to bring them into growth mindset, and they just put this on into their teams and into their business. I've got like two questions that I want to ask you, but first, before I go into these questions, I want to go back when you told me, listen, as humans, we were risk adverse. And then as women, we're risk adverse. And then as women of color, we're even more. Why so? Let's get into the subject.
Yeah. So, we talked about the human, we have the sub brain, the lizard brain, the primitive brain that is essentially a child in our head.
Yep.
That's either lashing out, throwing a tantrum that needs to be controlled, but resists control. And that part of our brain sits under the prefrontal cortex, which is for executive functioning and long-term planning and goal setting. So those two brains are in a constant conflict because they have never been integrated. It hasn't fully evolved to be fully integrated. So that's why it does feel like it's very true that there is an internal conflict, and that cortisol and adrenaline and real true nervous system reactions are happening in our body that feels so real that we want to contract, shrink, put up the white flag, and just stop. And that is natural and normal. It doesn't mean we're not smart. It doesn't mean we're not suited for risk. What it means is we're not practiced in risk. And you have to think about this. We do not have a slew of role models that have done this before. We pay homage to the women before us. Harriet Tubman in the United States is lauded, and Susan B. Anthony, and the women from the suffragist movements. But listen, in the 60s, those women that blazed a dangerous dark path were significantly criticized for being crazy, for being out of their mind, for standing tall and broad in a way that was never done before. It was incredibly unsafe for them, but they did it anyway. But we have to remember, we don't have legions and legions of women that were not cut down at the knees for sticking their necks out. So I'm East Indian descent, and I know for sure that the women before me were in unsafe positions and could not do what I have the privilege, the luxury, the liberty, and the power to do, because I happen to be raised in a household where I did have a big, bold voice. Not everybody does, and I can't assume that they did. So that's another thing. Women of different racial identities, of different religious identities and cultures did not have safety in saying what they needed to say that would have pushed the boundaries on investment into other women, financial freedom and independence of other women, of the investment opportunities and thriving businesses. So this is why when we get the messages, stay quiet, stay sweet, it wasn't always to harm us. It was to keep us safe. We don't have the practiced muscle. We don't have the communities that are talking about this. We don't have the networks of thousands and thousands of women that have come together that are speaking about this. We are now, and we get to use that privilege and that capability and that power to flex the new neural pathways so that when we do feel nausea, fear, shame, embarrassment, like literally like we're going to vomit. Because
I felt that.
Really
I felt that
scary.
30 minutes ago when 5 minutes ago when you were talking about like the bulb moves. I was like, oh man, I want to puke.
Yes, of course. And so one of the things you know for sure you're playing small and you're holding back when you're procrastinating something. When we are putting off or delaying something that we really want to do. So I pose this question to all the listeners today. What is something that you are putting off, procrastinating, or delaying? For sure, that is a risk-averse behavior. That's a risk avoidance behavior. How do you have to be thinking about yourself, how you will talk to yourself, and how you will handle failure in front of other people or just problems, dilemmas, mishaps, mistakes, rejection? How will you have to handle that? Then you're evolving into that risk-taking identity where you're solving for how you would manage it and feel the feelings that we said: humiliation, embarrassment, rejection, and shame, nausea, anxiety. You'll still go forward towards that goal. And you know that it's something that you care about.
So how do we practice risk-taking when everything inside of you is screaming, shut down? Like I'm happy to give this example because as I've been thinking of making changes, two things have happened. I slowed down. You just talked about it, right? Procrastination. Partially because I'm inwards right now, self-reflecting. What would I want to do? How would it be? You know, like that's an important part of creating change and taking risks. Sometimes people think risk taking is you don't think about it, you just jump. And there is a lot of strategy if you want to do it properly, because it's not irresponsible either. It's going to be a risk, but I'm going to make myself succeed through it, at least emotionally. You know, like I want to succeed at taking this risk in a way that feels planned and strategic. But even within this way of thinking, I can't tell you how many times my brain has been like, or just close your business altogether.
Right?
and find a job somewhere. Wouldn't that be better? And I'm like, as if I'm having these thoughts like 8 years into my business where nothing tells me I can't succeed just because I'm introducing change, therefore risk. So how, like for my listeners, and I have an arsenal of tools that I'm using and I'm laughing at my brain, right? Like my brain is being a brain. Primer brain, just thinking like, whoa. Let's like think of all the other options that we can do instead of taking a risk. What is your best go-to for our listeners thinking, especially women of color who, like you highlighted, culturally, or in their religion or in their own identity of who they are and how they're seen? It might really feel not only risky, but highly unsafe. Their family might not be supporting of this risk-taking. So how do you start taking risks when your body is screaming, shut it down?
I think you brought up so many incredible points about risk taking is not being reckless. Mm-hmm. It is not necessarily being impulsive, not always, but it does mean committing to action every single day, small and big steps. Action will take you there, especially if you're doing it from a place, to your point, where you've thought about the strategic winning. So the first thing, if we're going to go kind of small to big, is revving yourself up, gearing yourself up for why you want to flame the fire. So in the work that I do, in the context I do it, I use a lot of warmth and fire analogies. Big and bold. And so we want to talk about, where is the fire coming from? The good fire, the blazing fire? And are we making decisions from that fire, that desire, that passion, that genius inside of us? Or are we making it from fear? So it's the fire or the fear decision. If you're making it from fear, you will be less motivated. You will be wanting to do it, but you'll be contracting. You'll delay. You'll avoid. When you are fanning the fire and you know that it's great, you know that it's bold, but nobody's done it before, it's different, you get to still double down on your reasons. Why is it a great opportunity? What is the gap? What is the business case? What are new revenues that could be captured? New excitement that unifies your people at a really strong emotional level. And then you get to use your mission, vision, and values as a filter. Is this in alignment with my long-term mission, vision, and lived values of my organization? If it's going to draw my best people to me, clients and customers and fans, if it's going to draw and compel the best expert people, employees, and partnerships, strategic partnerships, even if I'm scared, I don't let the fear take over. I let the fire do its course. And I think about, from a strategic place, who would those partners be? What would they be doing? How would they be advancing my mission? What is my 10-year mission? And how is it rooted in taking new steps? So you want to reframe the concept of risk as new steps. Where are we as a team purposefully thinking about new concepts, new ideas, new thoughts, new products, new services? What is that? It's typically called innovation pipeline, where we're going to put some resources, people, time, and effort. If you are constantly putting out fires, to use another analogy, if you are constantly taking care of people issues in your organization, people are disengaged, people aren't interested, your mission is not bold enough and it's not vibrant enough in your organization. You need to start there. It needs some clarity and some sprucing up and some vibrancy, some high impact energy to get the fire going and to create that strong alignment into strategic decision-making and strategic execution around big results and big revenues.
I love the analogy with the fire, because when I think of the change I want to make, it's coming from fire. I'm like, this
sure
is like so exciting. I get so excited. When fear takes over, then it feels like this is all killing my fire. And so I think high achieving executives, business owners listening to us, they know what they mean, what you mean by fire. I used to be a therapist helping people with trauma. And I remember explaining which it's just coming back to me, to my traumatized patients, you can't never get rid of PTSD. It's going to be with you. So many things might feel like risk-taking or dangerous to do. That might never wear off, but you're going to do it anyways. You can't wait until it feels safe to take this risk to then start taking the car again, driving again, right? Like you might have to do it with fear. And so I like to welcome the thought of whatever kills, like in this case, like starting this fire, making like a big, massive fire. Everybody can see it in your neighborhood. If you're in your backyard, I live out in the country. So that's possibility, right? Like I could have a big fire pit here that everybody gets to see. And to have the thoughts, oh my God, what are they going to say? What is it going to happen? What if it burns my house? Like all the thoughts that you might have about this fire running, and sitting or accompanying your fear as you are letting fire just take its course. As you said, I think this is fascinating. It's not waiting to take the risk when it feels safe to do so. It's no longer a risk, right? Like
that's right.
You're
and
going to have
you
to
decide in advance. See, you're deciding in advance. And that's what makes this so beautiful, so different, and so powerful. When you decide in advance on purpose to fail, to push boundaries, to reach out to partnerships or advertisements, to do an advertising campaign that's really bold, maybe a photo shoot where you're more revealing, more, you're showing more of who you are.
Yeah.
you're more seen, and for me, that showed up as, not using a business suit, to really kind of think provocatively about how I wanted to position myself and the role model I wanted to be, right? It starts with us first as a leader, as a business owner, as a CEO. How are we behaving and thinking like a thought-provoking leader, right? So people want to frame it in a way that feels the safest to them on a spectrum. Like, you don't have to be the craziest voice out there until you're ready for that. But right now, what's thought provoking? What's creative in a way that you've never done before? What is value driven, that is in alignment with your mission, that you don't feel exactly ready to do, but you're going to do it anyway? Being ready is a myth.
Right. I agree.
It's a myth. We are enough. We are ready, and it feels unsafe. So I teach my clients, and I know that you do this too, the importance of doing things with discomfort.
Yep.
And kind of honoring that. So there is this exercise that we go through where we really are one. We sit with that fear inside our body. We locate it, we describe it, and we honor it. The anger, the fear, the shame, whatever it is. Because once we fully encapsulate and welcome and have awareness for those feelings that typically shut us down, when we really honor them in peace and quiet in a daily practice. So I'm talking 5 or 10 minutes a day where we sit with it and we say, you're safe within me. You have a message for me. What is that message? And that message of fear might say, oh my God, everybody's going to talk about you in the cocktail party. They're all going to talk about the ridiculous dress you wore. They're all going to make fun of you, and they're going to gasp, and they're going to wonder, why are you threatening the reputation of your family? Why are you threatening the honor of your family name? That's really popular and common in my background. Yeah. And then I get to ask myself, but is that what I'm doing? Is that even true? And if it's true, am I still okay with it? You want to know what you're really fending against, because let me tell you something. I truly believe that though my family might gasp, I also think they're like, oh my gosh, this is really who she is, though. She's standing up for what she believes in. And the ones that value that come on my journey, and the ones that don't, I'm going to find a way to be okay with that too. And that's another exercise.
What do you think has allowed you to be that person even within your family context? Because that's not easy, right? For many women of color and certain cultures and religions to be like the risk, I'm going to create the change, being the creating change. What do you think in your particular case? Because when I think about it, that's me too. I'm the one who's like, but everyone in my family would be like, of course, that'll be Olga. Olga would be the person who went on in a business when we're all scholars and we worked for somebody all of our lives. And in my answer for me is my mom. My mom is bold as F, right? Like she is just such a bold woman. She was a lawyer when no women were lawyers.
Oh my gosh.
She's like a badass woman. So I
got chills. Yeah.
Unbeknown to her, like she marked the road for me. I'm like, I get to do whatever I want. She doesn't know that she taught me this. I tell her all the time, she's like, you take way more risk than I do. I'm like, yeah, you gave me permission to do that. What do you think within you or in your context gave you that?
Yeah. So, I think as a child, growing up in the United States, there weren't a lot of East Indians at that time. And I did have an understanding for the freedom and the independence that I had as a woman in the Western world. Even though I faced a lot of discrimination, I faced a lot of jokes. That was a part of my story. That was a part of me pushing boundaries. It was a part of me kind of embracing that I had such a strong intellect and so much intelligence and magnetism. And even when I was quiet and introverted, I remember a time specifically, I was about 5 years old because I had to have been in kindergarten or so. And I had this, what they called a radio voice. And they were like, you have to be the one to do it because you have such a mature voice. So you be the one that does this like play demonstration and do the thing in the gymnasium. And I was like, okay, I have a voice. I have a radio voice. What does that mean? That one in there. So I thought about that like my whole life. And even when people didn't play with me initially, I moved towns from that town to another town. I was 8. People didn't play with me on the playground, but because they thought I was smart, they elected me to student government. That was really the start of a lot of things for me to this day. And so I'm a strong proponent of those frameworks within school systems and education. I'm really actively involved in education.
Now I'm getting chills.
In my local communities, I was on the board of directors. I was chair for 4 years of a local, we're on 37 acres now of a language immersion school, 3 languages for diverse, bold education. I'm like, heck yeah, I'm here for that. So it's like, we want to push those boundaries. And I think I did look to my passion. So yes, I looked to my fire. I looked to my personality, and I didn't even use when I thought myself as an introvert. I think sometimes we use that as an excuse. And I know that's a challenging commentary, but we cannot use being smart and an introvert to not push our boundaries and say the bold things, because sometimes the quiet voice is the most powerful one, right? We're leaning in when you talk the least, but we need you to talk. And I do believe that I created a lot of intentionality, even as a child, around things. Like I remember signing a petition in the 5th grade for the fact that we were the eldest in the 5th grade. We should be allowed to sit with our friends. And my best friends were in another classroom. We're role models. We're mature. And I signed a petition and made it happen. And so even when we think we don't have a voice, we do. And when we go at it with a lot of pragmatism, to your point, not irresponsibly, but with some data. And so to this day, I speak about concepts from where I know there is a necessary and important gap, and I'm willing to defend my reasons. I'm willing to defend the data and what I think is right, especially for legendary and longitudinal legacy leadership issues, especially then. And I always have been, and I encourage that for us to really think about the value of that and make it happen.
Oh my God. And how powerful for any women of color to be listening to this, because I think that we have, depending on where you're growing, like I grew up in Colombia, so I wasn't really a minority then. I only became a minority at the age of like 19 and aware of it. Like, oh, I'm a minority. To hear this message and to think I have a voice. I like once I had a title that said I'm a refugee, I remember introducing myself everywhere. I'm like, I'm a refugee. That was my intro. And then I noticed a change, and I at some point like, screw this. I don't have to tell people I'm a refugee. Like, who cares? That's not my name. So I'm just gonna say I'm Olga. And I think you said something that came back to me, because I've said it to a few people in different contexts, and it's always come back as feedback that they heard and they loved, which was, I have a voice and I love my voice. That's been my thinking, my way of thinking always. Like, I don't care if I'm cleaning the floors here or if I'm the person making the bagels. I've got a voice and I love my voice. It doesn't have to be the loudest in the room, but it is my voice. And I am for sure going to give it space so that I can hear it, and perhaps others will hear it too. And, that's been like my own thing, which has allowed me to get to great places that I don't think many immigrant women, minority women can get to. I was one of the executives at a child welfare child welfare agency, where I was the second other minority in our city. And when it was a provincial meeting, like the whole province, it was even more notorious that we were not. And I remember thinking, it's not the way I look, it's the way I think. I think differently. I think absolutely different than the rest of the group here, because of the context in which I was. And you know what? They didn't want to hear it. So I knew Olga's way was my way. I needed to get out, which leads me to this question. How do we support, like I don't know who's listening, but in my experience, the majority of executives are white women or men, but let's talk in the context of women. So leadership, women in leadership, the majority, I would say, are not our minorities. How can they support women from different backgrounds rise? How can they be allies? How do we encourage, understand the cultural background, why it might be more challenging, and as leaders ourselves that are, I mean, I am brown, but like, let's say if I was white, how do we help support our teammates, employees from different backgrounds especially women, to develop that risk advantage and like just go for positions that they might think is not for them?
I love that question so much, Olga, and thank you so much for asking it. I do DEI coaching and in universities and MBA programs. So I'm so glad that we're about to talk about this. One of the things we have to do first is, as leaders and with people with authority and power, we must invest in a dedicated and strategic recruiting and hiring process where we are committed. And this isn't a lip service thing where you just interview people and they have no chance of having the job. You must create a dedicated strategic plan to bring them into the company, to hire them, to invest in them, and to create a welcoming and belonging culture in the department and in the team. It is essential. What we know for sure is the demographics of all of our countries are changing. And we, to succeed at higher and greater levels, having a diverse, inclusive team will get you better results and more purposeful results that resonate to the generations coming after us. Ignoring this will be at the detriment and peril of your organizations, of your revenues, of your retention capability and profitability. And so we really need to make sure that we get the right people in those high level seats. We commit to them and we invest in them. How do we make them feel welcome? Introduce yourself as a high level leader. Offer a 10 to 15 minute coffee chat with them. Let them know that you are there to help them solve issues, to mentor them, and to give them some insight. You need to commit to making time on your schedule, backing it up and making sure you're recruiting, your pathway upwards, and your supporting systems are in place. So get with your HR, re-strategize how you're doing things, and make sure that you are active and involved in helping to give a voice and a platform to their brains and to the development of them into the fabric of the organization, not in lip service and not superficially.
I love that. And when I think back of my own career, none of that was in place. I was just a pioneer, like a risk taker. I would just be bold and be like, excuse me, I'll make my own way. And people were like, but you need to be here for 10 years minimally. I'm like, or I can just go and see what happens, you know? And I got places because of this way of thinking, but I do think I am privileged. I mean, I've been privileged my entire life. And one of the privileges having, you know, like a mother who's, like I said, very bold and respectful also of differences, and just like has no issues being having light on her to talk about things. And that's not everybody's experience from our different cultures as well. Lastly, to close this beautiful episode, any words of wisdom to anybody else listening to us who might be like, yes, that's me. I want to do something. I want to move up, but I'm afraid the systems are not in place. What do we say to then that woman who's listening, who's wanting to move up in like maybe a really male-centered industry or really non-culturally flexible industry, and she's thinking, who the heck am I?
Yeah, you are the exact person that is necessary now. At this time in history, there is a fight to be had. It is more critical than ever that we maintain and advance our power within organizations, our investment capabilities within our communities. Women, you must secure your financial independence. With financial independence comes authority, more privilege, more power. And we need that more than ever right now in the world. And we want to really commit to the gains and understand that we can feel any emotion within our body. And that will be the key to us still systematically and strategically taking on a risk identity of growth that allows us to put our money and our action and our time where we want to see results the most. So ask yourself where you want to make that impact and go for it full force. Get the support you need, surround yourself with great people, and take action big and small every single day.
Big and small. Oh, I love this. And if you're lacking confidence, come back and re-listen. the last 5 minutes of this conversation because that felt like a pep talk. Very powerful. Awesome. Niha, I have no words to thank you. Thank you so much for coming to share your brilliant mind with my audience. For anybody who wants to get a hold of Niha, you can just go over to our show notes. Her website is there. All her links are there. I highly suggest for any women in leadership, business owners to consider having a business coach, a mentor, an executive leadership coach. You are not growing if you don't have a coach. I'm telling you this. I am a self-development junkie, and I've never seen myself grow and explore the dimension of my potential as much as I do when I am being challenged, coached, when I have somebody like Niha saying to me, like, so what will be the worst thing that could happen if you use your voice with strategy? So please follow her. And if you're not being coached, if your strategy, if your company, if you own a company, if your teams are not being coached, really do think of this as an asset to you and your company. Niha, thank you so much. So much
for being
Olga.
Here. Love you, love your work. And I cannot wait for future conversations and partnership.
Oh, yes. And there's going to be a part 2 for sure.
Sounds great.
I hope you guys enjoyed this show. If you know of anybody else who needs to listen to it, by all means, forward it to them. Leave us a review, and I'll see you guys next Monday.